The night my family toasted my younger brother as if I didn't exist, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply realized very clearly that everything I thought was love had always been control. My name is Hannah Whitmore. I was 32 years old that Christmas, standing in my parents' dining room in a quiet suburb outside Hartford, Connecticut, holding a glass of sparkling cider I hadn't asked for. The table was long polished and crowded with familiar faces. My mother's silverware gleamed under the chandelier. My father had insisted on real candles this year, even though he worried constantly about safety. Everything looked warm. Everything looked normal. It wasn't. My father stood at the head of the table, cleared his throat, and smiled the way he always did when he thought he was being generous. My mother reached for his arm, her fingers tightening slightly, a gesture I'd seen my entire life. Control disguised as affection. "I just want to say," my father began lifting his glass, "how proud we are of our son, Andrew. This year has been incredible for him. The business expansion, the engagement, the way he's really stepped up as the man of the family." Applause followed. Genuine, loud, automatic. Andrew sat 2 seats away from me, his hand resting possessively on his fiancée's knee. He didn't look at me. He didn't have to. He already knew how this worked. My father continued, "You make us feel secure, Andrew. Like everything we've built is in good hands." Good hands, not mine. No one mentioned that I had worked at the same family company for 9 years. No one mentioned that I was the one who had negotiated contracts, cleaned up legal messes, stayed late when Andrew needed space. No one mentioned that I had postponed my own life more times than I could count, because my parents needed me close. The toast ended. Glasses clinked. Conversation resumed. I sat there, spine straight, face neutral, feeling something detach quietly inside my chest. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. This wasn't new. This was just the first time I stopped pretending it was accidental. The Whitmore Group had always been described as a family business, but that phrase meant very different things depending on which child you were. My father, Richard Whitmore, founded the logistics company in the early 90s. Regional warehouses, shipping contracts, unremarkable, steady, profitable. My mother, Elaine, handled the finances and the narrative. She liked to say she kept the family together. What she really did was decide who mattered. Andrew was 4 years younger than me. Louder, needier, praised for potential instead of results. From the time we were teenagers, he was treated like the future, and I was treated like the backup plan no one admitted existed. At 16, I was told to stay close to home for college so I could help when needed. Andrew left the state without a second thought. At 24, I was promoted quietly to operations manager, while Andrew was given a title with no responsibilities and a bigger office. When clients asked who made decisions, my parents said, "We'll see," which really meant not you. That Christmas, as the plates were cleared and dessert arrived, my mother leaned toward me with a soft smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're awfully quiet tonight, Hannah," she said. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Just tired." She patted my hand. "Well, next year will be exciting. The wedding, the transition, lots of changes." Transition. The word lingered. I didn't ask what she meant. I already knew. For months, there had been meetings I wasn't invited to, emails that went unanswered, decisions announced after the fact. I told myself it was temporary, that loyalty would count for something. That night, after everyone left, I stood alone in the kitchen, rinsing glasses. My father hovered nearby, pretending to wipe down counters that were already clean. "You did good tonight," he said finally. "Didn't make things awkward." I looked at him then, really looked. His face was older than I remembered, tired, afraid. Was that a concern, I asked? He shrugged. Families get complicated. Best not to stir things up. I nodded. Of course. Inside, something hardened. 2 weeks later, I found out exactly what the transition meant. I wasn't fired. I wasn't confronted. I was excluded. The invitation to the board meeting went to Andrew. So did the draft of the new operating agreement. So did the preliminary paperwork outlining ownership restructuring. I learned about it because a junior accountant forwarded me a document by mistake, apologizing profusely when she realized. The new structure listed Andrew as majority stakeholder. My name wasn't on it at all. Not reduced. Removed. I sat at my desk long after everyone left that day. The office dark, except for the glow of my computer screen. I read the document slowly, line by line, not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed to be sure I wasn't imagining things. Years of work, years of loyalty, erased with a signature I hadn't been invited to witness. I didn't cry. I didn't call my parents. I didn't confront Andrew. I closed the file, shut down my computer, and went home. That night, I pulled out a box I hadn't opened in years. Inside were old documents, emails, copies of contracts I had negotiated personally. Notes from my grandmother, Ruth Whitmore, who had quietly transferred certain assets to a trust years before her death, telling me, just in case you ever need proof. At the time, I thought she was being sentimental. Now, I understood she had been preparing me. I sat on the floor of my apartment, papers spread around me, and for the first time, I allowed myself one honest thought. They don't see me as family. They see me as infrastructure. And infrastructure is meant to be used, not protected. I picked up my phone and searched for a name I hadn't contacted in a long time. Daniel Price, corporate attorney, precise, unsentimental. I didn't leave a voicemail. I sent one sentence. I need to understand my options before I'm completely excluded. The reply came an hour later. Then it's good you reached out now. That was the moment the story stopped being about hurt feelings and started being about revenge. The first thing Daniel Price said to me when we sat down in his office was, "You waited longer than you should have." He didn't say it with judgment. He said it like a fact, the way surgeons announce damage before deciding where to cut. His office overlooked downtown Hartford, all glass and sharp angles, the kind of place that made people feel small on purpose. Daniel was in his late 40s, silver at the temples, reputation built on dismantling messy family businesses without ever raising his voice. We had met once years earlier when my grandmother insisted I attend a meeting just to listen. At the time, I hadn't understood why she kept glancing at me like she was memorizing my face. Now I did. "They're restructuring ownership," I said, calmly, sliding the copied agreement across his desk. "My name isn't on it." Daniel skimmed the document once, then again more slowly. His mouth tightened just slightly. "This isn't a restructure," he said. "This is a removal." I nodded. I figured. He leaned back. "The question isn't whether it's unfair. The question is whether it's legal." That word, legal, it grounded me. "I've worked there 9 years," I said. "Operations contracts, vendor negotiations. I've signed deals on behalf of the company." Daniel steepled his fingers. "Did you ever hold equity?" "Not formally." "Did you ever sign anything, waiving equity?" "No." "Did your grandmother leave you anything?" I hesitated. Then I reached into my bag and placed a second folder on his desk. The trust documents were yellowed at the edges, but intact. Ruth Whitmore had been meticulous. She always was. She had left Andrew her house. She had left my parents a modest sum. And she had left me something my parents never mentioned. A conditional interest tied to company performance. Quiet, buried, activated only if certain thresholds were met. Daniel's eyes sharpened as he read. This, he said, slowly changes everything. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not relief. Permission. They don't know about it, I said. No, he agreed. And that's why you haven't been cut out yet. Not completely. I crossed my arms. What do I do? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the city. You stop reacting, he said finally. And you start documenting. For the next 3 weeks, I became invisible on purpose. I went to work. I did my job. I smiled when spoken to. I asked no questions. I didn't correct Andrew when he misrepresented timelines in meetings. I didn't defend myself when he subtly rewrote history. I let him talk. People like Andrew always talk too much when they think they've won. I saved emails. I forwarded calendar invites to a private account. I kept copies of contracts that had my name on them, but were now being attributed to him. I recorded meetings where decisions were made without proper authority. At home, I slept lightly. My phone stayed face down. My parents didn't call. When they did, it was brief. Everything okay at work? My mother asked, once her voice casual. Busy, I replied, but fine. She seemed satisfied with that. Andrew, on the other hand, grew bolder. One afternoon, he stopped by my office unannounced. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, wearing the watch my father bought him after the engagement. You've been quiet, he said. I looked up from my screen. Have I? Yeah, usually you have opinions. I still do, he smiled. Funny. Dad says you're taking things better than he expected. I held his gaze. What things? He waved a hand vaguely. Change. Growth. You know how it is. I nodded. I do. He studied me for a moment, searching for something. When he didn't find it, he straightened. Well, he said just wanted to make sure you're on board. This transition needs unity. Unity. Another word that meant obedience. After he left, I forwarded the audio recording of that conversation to Daniel. His reply was immediate. Good. He's sloppy. The wedding was announced in early spring. Elaine insisted it be lavish. Historic venue. Outdoor ceremony. My parents offered to cover most of it as an investment in the family image. Andrew accepted without hesitation. I was assigned a role without being asked. You'll help coordinate vendors, my mother said, over brunch one Sunday. You're good at that sort of thing. I sipped my coffee. I'm stepping back from work-related tasks outside my job description. Her smile faltered. It's just temporary. So is everything, I said lightly. She stared at me, startled by my tone. At the office, the changes accelerated. Andrew announced a new leadership structure. New hires reported directly to him. I was no longer included in strategy sessions. My access to certain financial systems was quietly restricted. That was when Daniel told me to stop waiting. They're building a narrative, he said over the phone. Eventually, they'll say you were never essential, that you chose to step back. What's the move, I asked. You enforce your leverage. He filed a notice of interest tied to my grandmother's trust. Not publicly, not aggressively, just enough to freeze certain transactions until ownership was clarified. The reaction was immediate. Andrew stormed into my office that afternoon, face flushed. What the hell did you do? He demanded, slamming the door shut behind him. I looked up slowly. Excuse me, Dad says there's a legal complication. Something you triggered. I folded my hands on the desk. I followed the law. His jaw tightened. You're trying to sabotage me. No, I said calmly. I'm protecting myself. This is family, he snapped. I met his eyes. Then you shouldn't have treated me like expendable staff. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, he looked unsure. That night, my father called. His voice was strained. Why didn't you tell us about your grandmother's trust? You never asked, I said. Silence stretched. We were handling things, he said, finally. You should have trusted us. I closed my eyes. I did. For years. Another pause. Then quietly. This complicates Andrew's future. I almost laughed. It protects mine, I replied. The call ended without resolution. That week, Daniel uncovered something else. A shell company, newly formed, quietly siphoning logistics contracts away from Whitmore Group and into an entity Andrew partially controlled. It was clumsy, rushed, greedy, illegal. Daniel sent me the summary with a single note. This is where the balance shifts. I stared at the screen, heart steady, breath even. They thought they were erasing me. They had no idea I was about to redraw the entire structure, and I hadn't even raised my voice yet. By the time I understood how deep Andrew's side operation went, I had stopped thinking of him as reckless. Reckless people make mistakes out of impulse. Andrew was doing this with intention. He just wasn't as careful as he thought. Daniel and I met again on a Wednesday morning, earlier than usual. His assistant didn't offer coffee. That was how I knew the conversation wouldn't be long or comforting. The shell company is called Northline Solutions, Daniel said, sliding a thin file across the table. It was incorporated 8 months ago, quietly. 2 directors, one of them is a college friend of your brother's. The other is Andrew listed under a middle initial. I flipped through the pages without rushing. Contracts, vendor agreements, familiar routes, familiar clients. They're diverting work, I said. Yes. Before the restructure. Yes. And using Whitmore Group resources to fulfill it. Daniel nodded, which means breach of fiduciary duty, misuse of company assets, and potentially fraud. I exhaled slowly. My parents know. There's no indication they do. That mattered more than I expected. Not because it excused them, but because it clarified something essential. Andrew hadn't just been favored. He'd been trusted without oversight. I had been managed, controlled, watched. How do we proceed, I asked. Daniel folded his hands. You don't expose this yet. I looked up. Why not? Because once you do, you lose leverage. Right now, Andrew doesn't know how much you know. Your parents don't know there's a fire in the walls. And the board doesn't know the foundation is cracked. I leaned back, so I wait. You prepare, Daniel corrected, and you let them keep talking. That part came easily. Andrew began scheduling meetings. I wasn't invited to, then casually summarizing them afterward, always in ways that minimized my role. We decided to streamline operations, he said one afternoon, standing in my doorway. You'll focus more on internal processes, less client-facing stuff. Who decided, I asked. He smiled. Leadership. I nodded. Of course. Behind the scenes, I documented everything. Dates, times, who was present, who signed what, which contracts had been shifted to Northline Solutions and when. It felt strange, observing my own erasure with such calm. But calm was the point. Panic would have tipped my hand. Silence made them underestimate me. My mother noticed the change first. You don't come by as much, she said on the phone one evening. Everything all right? Busy, I replied. With what? Life. She laughed softly. Don't drift away, Hannah. Families need closeness. I didn't respond. The wedding planning accelerated. Elaine called it a celebration of continuity. Andrew called it a fresh start. I was copied on emails assigning me tasks, but I responded selectively, declining anything that crossed into unpaid labor. My mother confronted me in person a week later, standing in my apartment doorway with that familiar tight smile. You're being difficult, she said. I'm being careful. With what? With my time. Her eyes narrowed. This attitude is new. It isn't, I said gently. You're just noticing it now. She left shortly after, displeased and unsettled. At work, the pressure increased. A performance review appeared on my calendar. Unscheduled, unexplained. Andrew sat across from me in the conference room, a printed form between us. My father was conspicuously absent. We need to talk about alignment, Andrew said, tapping the paper. Do we? I asked. He cleared his throat. Some people feel you're not fully committed to the company's direction. Which people? He hesitated. Leadership. I waited. You've been less visible, he continued. Less collaborative? I nodded. I've been doing my job. He smiled thinly. Perception matters. So does documentation, I replied. His eyes flicked up. What's that supposed to mean? It means, I said evenly, that if my commitment is being questioned, I'd like specifics in writing. He stiffened. This isn't a threat. I didn't say it was. The review ended without conclusions. Another non-event designed to put me on notice without leaving fingerprints. That night Daniel called. They're trying to build a case to sideline you officially, he said. Soft exit, narrative control. I know. Good. Because we're almost ready. The next piece came from an unexpected place. Margaret Collins, the company's longest-serving warehouse supervisor, requested a private meeting with me. She was in her early 60s, sharp-eyed, unimpressed by titles. I don't like what's happening, she said, once the door was closed. Neither do I replied. She slid a flash drive across my desk. These are shipping logs, internal memos, instructions that came down from Andrew directly. I didn't touch it yet. Why are you giving this to me? Because I've seen this before, she said. Men who think the company is theirs because no one ever told them no. I met her gaze. This could put you at risk, she shrugged. I'm retiring in a year. I'd rather leave clean. I took the drive. That night, I reviewed the contents slowly, methodically. The paper trail was clearer than I expected. Andrew had authorized rerouting shipments. He had approved resource allocation to Northline. He had signed off on invoices billed back to Whitmore Group. It wasn't just unethical. It was prosecutable. Daniel's response was a single sentence. Now we choose timing. The timing came sooner than expected. My father requested a family meeting. Neutral location. No lawyers. We need to clear the air, he said. I agreed, knowing exactly what was coming. We met at their house on a Sunday afternoon. Elaine sat rigidly on the sofa. Andrew paced. My father stood near the window, hands clasped behind his back. This tension can't continue, my father said. It's tearing the family apart. I looked at him. I didn't create it. Andrew scoffed. You're holding things hostage. I'm enforcing boundaries. Elaine leaned forward. You've always been sensitive. That was when I stood. I'm not here to be understood, I said calmly. I'm here to be clear. They all looked at me. I know about Northline Solutions. I continued. I know about the diverted contracts, the misuse of company assets, the false reporting. Andrew froze. My father turned sharply. What is she talking about? Andrew's mouth opened, closed. Elaine stared at him. Andrew, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply stated facts. I've documented everything I said. And I've spoken to counsel. The room shifted. Fear replaced irritation. This stays in the family, my father said quickly. That depends, I replied. On what Elaine demanded. I met her eyes. On whether I walk away with what's mine. I said. Or whether this goes where it legally belongs. The silence that followed wasn't shocked. It was calculating. And that's when I knew. They weren't choosing between right and wrong. They were choosing between me and their image. And that choice would decide everything. No one spoke for a full 30 seconds after I finished. It was my father who moved first. He lowered himself into the armchair like the weight in his chest had finally become physical. My mother stayed rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line. Andrew didn't sit at all. He just stood there, staring at the floor, as if the right pattern in the rug might save him. This is serious, my father said. Finally, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. If what you're saying is true. It is, I said. And you already know that. He looked up at me startled. What do you mean? You wouldn't be asking if you didn't already suspect something, I replied. You just didn't think it would come from me. Andrew laughed sharply. Too loud, too fast. This is insane. You've been looking for a reason to turn on me for years. I turned toward him slowly. If that were true, I would have done it long ago. Elaine stood abruptly. Enough. We are not doing this here. Then, where I asked. At the office, in court, her eyes flashed. You wouldn't dare. I already have, I said. That was the moment the conversation stopped being emotional and became transactional. My father rubbed his forehead. What do you want? The question landed exactly where it needed to. I want my position formalized, I said evenly. Equity consistent with my contribution. Access restored. And written acknowledgement that my grandmother's interest will be honored without interference. Andrew snapped his head up. That's extortion. Daniel's words echoed in my mind. Leverage only works if you don't apologize for having it. It's resolution, I said. The alternative is exposure. Elaine's voice trembled with anger. You would destroy your own family over money. I met her gaze. No. I'm refusing to let you destroy me for convenience. Silence again. Thicker this time. Andrew finally spoke, his voice lower, dangerous. If this gets out, it ruins everything. The wedding, the company, Dad's legacy. I nodded. You should have thought of that before Northline. My father closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had shifted. Not remorse, calculation. We need time, he said, to think. You've had years, I replied. You have 2 weeks. Elaine's breath caught. That's not reasonable. It's generous, I said. I left without waiting for permission. 2 days later, Andrew tried a different approach. He showed up at my apartment unannounced, standing too close, voice low, like we were co-conspirators. You don't have to do this, he said. We can work something out. I crossed my arms. I offered terms. You're being rigid. I'm being precise. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. You've always been like this. You don't bend. That's not true, I said. I bent for years. I just stopped breaking. His eyes hardened. You think you'll win? I already have leverage, I replied. Winning is just timing. He stared at me, then smiled without warmth. You know Mom will never forgive you. I shrugged. She never protected me. That ended the conversation. At work, the atmosphere shifted. Emails were cautious. Meetings were tense. Andrew avoided me entirely, delegating communication through others. My system access was quietly restored. Not announced, just reversed like it had never happened. Daniel called that evening. They're scared, he said. That's good. But fear makes people sloppy. I know, I said. What's next? They'll try to isolate you, he replied. Or discredit you. Or rush a settlement that looks fair, but isn't. He paused, which means we move first. He filed a formal request for an independent audit. Not public, internal. Perfectly legal, impossible to ignore. The board's response was immediate. Emergency meeting scheduled. External firm retained. Andrew's face, when he read the notice, told me everything I needed to know. Margaret Collins stopped by my office later that day. You stirred the pot, she said, not unkindly. Someone had to, I replied. She nodded. Good, because others are watching now. Who? She smiled faintly. People who've been quiet a long time. That night my mother called. Her voice was softer than usual. Careful. You've made your point, she said. We can still fix this. I've been fixing things my whole life, I replied. This time, I'm protecting myself. You're tearing us apart, she whispered. No, I said. I'm stepping out of the middle. She hung up without another word. The audit uncovered more than Daniel or I had expected. Inflated invoices, conflicts of interest, email chains. Andrew thought were deleted. It was all there laid out with clinical detachment by people who had no emotional investment in protecting him. The board requested explanations. Andrew provided none that held up. My father sat through those meetings in silence, watching the image he had carefully constructed fracture in real time. When the preliminary findings were circulated, Daniel forwarded them to me with a single note. This is where control changes hands. The final move came on a Thursday afternoon. My father asked me to come to the office after hours. He was alone when I arrived, sitting in the conference room where so many decisions had been made without me. "You forced my hand," he said quietly. "I gave you a choice," I replied. He looked older than ever. "I never thought it would come to this." "I did," I said, "years ago." He slid a folder across the table. Revised ownership structure, my name formally listed, voting rights, legal protections. "This satisfies your demands," he said. I opened it carefully, read every line. "It satisfies my boundaries," I corrected. He nodded once. "Andrew will step down." "From Northline?" I asked. "From everything he said, effective immediately." I closed the folder. "I'll have my lawyer review this," I said. "Then I'll sign." As I stood to leave, he spoke again. "You could have destroyed us." I turned back. "You did that yourselves. I just stopped holding it together." Outside, the air felt lighter. The company wasn't saved yet. The family wasn't healed. Nothing was neat or clean. But for the first time in my life, the ground beneath my feet felt like it was mine. And Andrew, he still thought this was the worst thing that could happen to him. He had no idea what was coming next. Andrew didn't leave quietly. Men like him never do. The announcement came the following Monday morning, phrased carefully, circulated internally, as a temporary leadership transition. No mention of Northline, no mention of misconduct, just a vague reference to strategic realignment. Andrew was placed on indefinite leave, his access badge deactivated, his office locked. By noon, everyone knew what that really meant. I watched it unfold from my desk, not with satisfaction, but with a kind of distant awareness. This was the part people imagined as revenge. It wasn't. It was consequence. The real danger came after. Andrew's first move was silence. No calls, no texts, no angry emails. That worried me more than any outburst would have. Daniel warned me that afternoon. He's cornered. That makes him unpredictable. I nodded. What's the next likely play? Smear campaign, he said. Or legal intimidation. Or emotional manipulation through your parents. All three came within 48 hours. It started with a message from an old colleague. "Hey, Hannah, just wanted to check in. Heard some things. Hope you're okay." I didn't ask what things. I already knew. By evening, my inbox held 3 similar notes. Vague concern, carefully worded. No accusations, but enough to signal that a story was being circulated. Daniel confirmed it the next morning. "He's telling people you forced him out," he said. "That you threatened the company. That you've been angling for control for years." I leaned back in my chair. "Classic." "Yes," Daniel replied. "And ineffective, given the audit, but still damaging," I said. "Which is why we don't respond publicly," he said. "We respond structurally." He drafted a cease and desist. Not aggressive, just firm, documenting false statements, putting Andrew on notice. Andrew responded through his own attorney 2 days later. The letter was long, defensive, emotional. It accused me of betrayal, of exploiting family trust, of acting without regard for relational harm. Daniel read it once and smiled. "He's panicking," he said. My parents, meanwhile, took a different route. Elaine showed up at my apartment again, this time alone. She looked smaller somehow, less certain. "This has gone too far," she said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. "Your brother is devastated." I closed the door behind her. "He's experiencing consequences." She shook her head. "You always had to be right." I studied her face. "No, I just stopped being quiet." She sat on the couch, hands folded tightly. "Do you have any idea what people are saying?" "Yes," I said, "and I'm okay with it." Her eyes filled with tears, the first real ones I'd seen in years. "We did our best." That sentence had ended more conversations than I could count. "I know," I said softly. "And your best still hurt me." She looked at me, then truly looked, as if seeing me for the first time outside the role she'd assigned. "I don't recognize you anymore," she whispered. I nodded. "That's because you never knew me without control. She left shortly after saying nothing else. The next escalation came from an unexpected angle. Andrew filed a civil suit. Not against the company, against me, alleging breach of familial duty, interference with business relationships, and emotional distress. It was thin, desperate, and dangerous only if I reacted emotionally. Daniel was almost amused when he told me. He's hoping to drain you, he said, force you into settlement through exhaustion. What do we do? I asked. We let him, Daniel said, and we counter. He filed a motion to dismiss within 24 hours, attaching the audit, the trust documentation, and evidence of Andrew's misconduct. Then he added something else. A countersuit, defamation, misappropriation of assets, breach of fiduciary duty. This one wasn't thin. It was devastating. The court date was set for early summer. The wedding was scheduled for late spring. The timing wasn't accidental. Andrew's fiancée Claire called me that night. Her voice was tight, controlled. I didn't know, she said, about any of this. I believe you, I replied. She hesitated. Is it true? Yes. Silence. I'm sorry, she whispered. So am I said. And I meant it. The wedding was postponed a week later. Officially, for logistical reasons. Unofficially, because the trust had collapsed. At work, something shifted. People stopped whispering. They started asking questions. Margaret Collins wasn't the only one who had noticed patterns. Others came forward, not loudly, carefully, with documents, with timelines. I listened. I documented. I forwarded everything to Daniel. The board called another meeting. This time, Andrew wasn't invited. I was. When I sat at the table, it felt different. Not triumphant. Grounded. One of the directors cleared his throat. We underestimated the situation. Yes, I said. You did. There was no apology, just acknowledgement. By the end of the meeting, the path forward was clear. Andrew would be formally removed. Northline Solutions would be dissolved. Legal action would proceed. And my role would be expanded, not because I demanded it, because there was no longer any plausible argument against it. That night, I stood in my apartment, lights off, looking out over the city. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. You think you've won? You haven't. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Daniel and blocked the number. Revenge. I was learning wasn't about spectacle. It was about staying steady while someone else unraveled. And Andrew was unraveling fast. The court date loomed. The family was fractured, and the final decisions hadn't even been made yet. The closer we got to the court date, the quieter my life became. Not calmer, quieter. Friends stopped asking casual questions. Colleagues chose their words carefully. Even my parents went silent, as if ignoring the situation might rewind it. I learned quickly that when a toxic family loses control, it doesn't explode right away. It retreats, it watches, it waits for you to make a mistake. I didn't. Daniel and I met every Thursday afternoon, same conference room, same chairs, same routine. He reviewed filings. I reviewed timelines. Nothing emotional entered the room. Everything stayed clean, factual, restrained. That discipline mattered more than anything. Andrew's lawsuit was formally dismissed within 3 weeks. The judge didn't even entertain oral arguments. The order was brief and devastating. No standing, no evidence, no cause. Andrew's attorney withdrew 2 days later. That was when Andrew made his biggest mistake. He went to the press, not a major outlet, a local business blog that loved family drama stories, framed as cautionary tales. The article painted him as a visionary, pushed out by a cold, power-hungry sister. It quoted unnamed sources. It used words like betrayal, ambition, ruthless. My name was mentioned 6 times. Daniel called me the moment it went live. He violated the cease and desist, he said, publicly. I closed my eyes. What does that give us? Everything, he replied. By the end of the day, Daniel had filed an amended claim, adding reputational harm and intentional interference. Screenshots were preserved. The journalist was contacted. The outlet was informed they had published defamatory content based on false representations. The article disappeared within 48 hours. The retraction did not. Meanwhile, the audit findings were finalized. The board circulated the final report internally first, then quietly to regulators. Not out of vengeance, out of obligation. Northline Solutions was formally flagged, bank accounts frozen, investigations opened. Andrew's personal finances were scrutinized next. That was when the real panic set in. He showed up at my apartment again. This time he didn't knock. I opened the door to find him standing there, unshaven eyes, bloodshot jacket, wrinkled, like he'd slept in it. "You did this," he said hoarsely. I didn't move aside. "You shouldn't be here." He laughed bitterly, still playing the calm one. I met his gaze. "Say what you came to say." His shoulders slumped. "They're coming after me." "Yes," I said. "They are." "You could stop this," he insisted. "You could call Daniel. Tell him to ease up." I shook my head. "It's not up to me anymore." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "You wanted this." "I wanted fairness," I replied. "What happens now is the result of your choices." His voice dropped. "Do you have any idea what Mom's like right now?" I paused. Not because I felt guilty, because I felt tired. "I'm sure she's doing what she always does," I said. "Protecting you." He scoffed. "She can't fix this." "No," I said. "She can't." He took a step closer. "You always hated me." That one almost made me smile. "No," I said quietly. "I hated what I became around you." He didn't have a response for that. I closed the door without another word. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The court date arrived on a humid Monday morning in June. Andrew looked smaller in the courtroom. Not physically, psychologically. His confidence had evaporated, replaced by a restless twitch in his jaw, his hands clasping and unclasping like he was trying to hold onto something slipping away. Our attorneys spoke. Evidence was presented. Andrew's counsel tried to argue intent, tried to frame actions as misunderstandings. The judge listened, asked questions, took notes, then ruled. Andrew was ordered to repay misappropriated funds, personally. He was barred from holding an executive role in any Whitmore-affiliated entity. Further investigation was referred to regulators. It wasn't dramatic. It was final. Outside the courthouse, my parents avoided my eyes. Elaine looked hollow. Richard looked older than ever. I didn't approach them. I didn't need to. A week later, my father resigned as CEO. Not because he was forced to, because the board made it clear that trust had been compromised too deeply. They offered him a dignified exit. He accepted. The company stabilized, slowly, carefully. I was appointed interim COO with expanded authority. Not because I was family, because I was competent. Andrew's wedding was officially canceled. Claire moved out of state shortly after. I heard she took a job offer she'd been putting off for years. I hoped she found peace. Andrew moved back into my parents' house. That detail came from my mother, delivered like a quiet confession during a phone call I hadn't initiated. "He's struggling," she said. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied, and meant it in the way one feels sorry about a storm that destroys a house built on sand. She hesitated. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" I thought about the years I'd swallowed my voice, the contracts I'd negotiated without credit, the way I'd mistaken endurance for love. "Yes," I said, "all the time." She waited, and I don't regret choosing differently. She didn't call again after that. The final paperwork arrived in late summer. Revised ownership, legal protections, formal recognition of my grandmother's trust interest. I signed everything in Daniel's office, pen steady, heart calm. When I finished, he looked at me and said, "Most people wait until they're broken to draw boundaries." I capped the pen. I waited until I was clear. Outside, the city moved on. People hurried past. Life continued. I stood there for a moment, realizing something simple and profound. The revenge wasn't Andrew's downfall. It was my freedom, and I hadn't raised my voice once. There was still one chapter left, the one where I decided what kind of life I wanted, now that no one else was deciding it for me. Freedom, it turns out, is quiet at first. There was no celebration when Andrew's name was officially removed from every corporate document. No applause when my authority became permanent. No moment where the room stopped and acknowledged the shift. The world didn't pause to recognize that I had survived something. It just kept moving. For the first few weeks, that unsettled me more than the conflict ever had. I woke up early, heart already alert, as if waiting for another crisis. My body hadn't caught up to the reality that I no longer needed to brace myself. At the office, people adjusted cautiously. They watched how I handled meetings, how I spoke to vendors, how I responded when something went wrong. They were testing whether I would rule by resentment. I didn't. I ruled by clarity. I didn't undo Andrew's decisions out of spite. I reviewed them. Some stayed, most didn't. Northlane's shadow lingered in the margins of the books, and we spent weeks untangling the damage. I brought in an external compliance team, not to punish, but to reset. The company needed to survive what had been hidden inside it. So did I. Daniel checked in less frequently now. Our conversation shortened, shifting from strategy to confirmation. "You're doing well," he said during one call. "Don't sabotage yourself by overcorrecting." I understood what he meant. Trauma can make you too vigilant. It can convince you that rest is a trap. I forced myself to leave the office before dark, to cook real meals, to sit in silence without filling it with plans. It was during one of those evenings that my Aunt Lorraine called. She was my father's younger sister, the one who had always watched quietly from the edges of family gatherings. "I should have spoken up," she said without preamble. "Years ago, I leaned against my kitchen counter. You didn't have to." "I did," she insisted. "We all saw how they leaned on you, how they praised him." Her voice softened. "Your grandmother knew." I smiled faintly. She always did. Lorraine hesitated. "Your parents are lost right now." I considered that. They built their world on imbalance. "Yes," she agreed. "And now it's gone." That wasn't something I needed to fix. At work, another truth emerged. Andrew hadn't been the only one benefiting from favoritism. He had simply been the most visible. Others had grown comfortable hiding behind him, letting him take risks they could quietly profit from. I addressed that without drama. Contracts were reviewed, roles clarified, expectations documented. Some people resigned, others adapted. The culture shifted, slowly, painfully, necessarily. One afternoon, Margaret Collins stopped by my office. "You did something important," she said. "You made it boring again." I raised an eyebrow. "Boring," she smiled. "Boring is honest. No secrets, no games." I watched her leave, realizing that stability was its own form of justice. My parents didn't come around right away. When they did, it wasn't together. My father called first. "I don't recognize the house without him here," he said quietly. I sat with the phone in my hand, listening to the sound of regret he couldn't quite articulate. "I should have listened," he said. "To you. To your grandmother." "Yes," I replied. There was no argument in my voice, no anger, just truth. "I don't expect forgiveness," he added. "That's good," I said, "because I'm not offering absolution." He exhaled. "What are you offering?" "Boundaries." We didn't talk long. My mother waited another month. When she finally called, her voice was brittle. "I don't know how to be your mother if I can't guide you," she said. I closed my eyes. "You can know me instead." She didn't respond. That was her work to do, not mine. In late September, the board made my role permanent. Chief Operating Officer. No interim, no qualifiers. I accepted without ceremony. That night, I walked home instead of driving. The air was crisp. the city lights softer than I remembered. I passed couples laughing outside restaurants, families walking dogs, people living lives that had nothing to do with mine. I thought about how much of my identity had been shaped by resistance, by endurance, by waiting for permission. Without that pressure, something else began to form. Choice. I took a weekend off, the first real one in years. I visited a small coastal town north of the city, stayed in a quiet inn, walked along the water without checking my phone. No one there knew my last name. No one expected anything from me. On the last evening, sitting on a bench, overlooking the ocean, I realized something that surprised me. I didn't miss my old life. Not the approval, not the proximity, not the role. I missed the idea of being valued without conditions. And now finally, I understood that I didn't need my family to give that to me. I could choose it. There was still one loose end. Andrew hadn't contacted me since the court ruling. That silence wouldn't last. It never does. And when it broke, it would force the final decision I'd been avoiding. Not about the company, about family, and whether blood alone was enough to earn access to my life anymore. Andrew reached out on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that feels ordinary until it isn't. The message came through my work email, not my phone. That alone told me this wasn't emotional. It was strategic. Hannah, I'd like to talk. Just us. No lawyers, no parents. I think we owe each other that. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Not because I was tempted, but because I wanted to be honest with myself about why it bothered me at all. Daniel's voice echoed in my head. Silence is information. I didn't respond right away. 2 hours later, another message arrived. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for closure. Closure. The word people use when they want relief without accountability. I closed my laptop and went home. That night, I slept poorly. Not from fear, but from memory. The version of Andrew who used to knock on my bedroom door when we were kids. The one who borrowed my notes, my clothes, my time. The one I protected long before I protected myself. By morning, I had my answer. I replied with a single sentence. Coffee, 1 hour, public place. We met at a cafe near the river, the kind with big windows and uncomfortable chairs that discourage lingering. Andrew arrived early. He looked thinner, older. His confidence hadn't vanished completely, but it no longer filled the room. Thanks for coming, he said, standing too quickly. I nodded and sat across from him. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I didn't expect things to go this far, he said finally. I studied him. That's not the same as saying you didn't cause them. He looked down at his hands. I made mistakes. Yes, I said. You did. He exhaled, frustration creeping in. You always talk like you're above this. I'm not above it, I replied. I'm outside it now. His jaw tightened. You took everything from me. I didn't raise my voice. No, I stopped you from taking more from me. He leaned back, eyes narrowing. Do you feel better? I considered the question. I feel honest. That's not an answer. It is, I said. Just not the one you want. He stared out the window for a long moment. When he looked back, something in his expression had shifted. Not remorse, calculation. They're struggling, he said quietly. Mom and Dad. The house is tense. Quiet. They don't know how to talk to each other anymore. I took a sip of my coffee. That's not my responsibility. They ask about you, he pressed. They wonder if you'll ever come back. I met his gaze. Come back to what? To the family, he said. I paused. I never left. I was pushed. He flinched at that. I'm trying to rebuild, he said. Find work. Start over. I hope you do, I replied. But he continued. I can't do it alone. There it was, the ask beneath the conversation. I'm not your safety net anymore, I said gently. His eyes hardened. You think you're better than us now? No, I said. I think I finally stopped being smaller. Silence fell between us again. This one felt final. "I won't fight you," he said at last. "I just don't want to be erased." I stood. "I'm not erasing you, Andrew. I'm removing access." He watched me gather my coat. "Is that it?" "Yes," I said. "Take care of yourself." I left without looking back. The next escalation came faster than I expected. 2 weeks later, my assistant informed me that my parents had requested a meeting with the board, not as stakeholders, as concerned parties. Daniel called within minutes. "They're claiming you're alienating family members from the company," he said, "that your leadership is too rigid." I almost smiled. "They're trying to reinsert control," he continued. "Indirectly." "What's the risk?" I asked. "Minimal," Daniel replied. "But it tells us something." "They haven't accepted it," I said. "No," he agreed. "And they may never." The board meeting was brief. Facts were presented. Performance metrics, compliance reports, growth projections. My leadership wasn't emotional. It was effective. The request was denied. That evening, my mother left a voicemail. Long, unfiltered. She accused me of pride, of cruelty, of forgetting where I came from. I listened once. Then I deleted it. Not out of spite, out of clarity. Some people only recognize connection when it comes with control. I wasn't willing to trade my peace for proximity anymore. A month later, I received an envelope in the mail. Handwritten address. Familiar handwriting. Inside was a single photograph. My grandmother, Ruth, sitting at her kitchen table, smiling softly at the camera. On the back, in faded ink, a sentence she'd written years ago. "Strength doesn't always look like staying." I sat on the edge of my bed, holding the photo, feeling something loosen inside me. The story with Andrew was over. The story with my parents was unresolved. But my story, that was finally moving forward. And the next choice I made wouldn't be about revenge. It would be about legacy and who I allowed to stand beside me as I built it. Legacy is a word people like to use when they're afraid of endings. I started thinking about it after the photograph arrived. My grandmother's handwriting stayed with me, not as comfort, but as instruction. Strength doesn't always look like staying. It also doesn't look like burning everything down. It looks like choosing what continues and what stops with you. At work, the company entered a new phase. Not growth yet, repair. We closed 2 underperforming warehouses. We renegotiated contracts that had been rushed through during Andrew's visionary period. I replaced a few senior managers who had confused loyalty with silence. It wasn't dramatic. It was methodical. People began to trust the quiet. One afternoon, the head of compliance stopped by my office. "We've finished the internal review," she said. "There's nothing else hiding." That mattered more to me than profit. Outside the office, my life simplified. Fewer calls, fewer explanations, fewer apologies. I learned how much time I'd spent managing other people's discomfort and how little of that had ever been reciprocated. Then the letter came. It was from my parents' attorney. Formal, polite, carefully vague. They were updating their estate plan. They wanted to ensure clarity and avoid future misunderstandings. The letter requested a meeting. Neutral location, no assumptions. I read it twice, then once more. Daniel's response was immediate. "They're trying to regain leverage. Through inheritance," I said. "Yes," he replied. "Or the threat of exclusion." I sat with that. The irony was almost elegant. All those years of being excluded, and now they thought it would scare me. "What do you want to do?" Daniel asked. I didn't answer right away. That night, I went for a walk. The city had settled into autumn. Leaves gathered along the sidewalks. The air smelled like change and restraint. I thought about how often inheritance is used as currency in toxic families. Love with conditions. Approval delayed until obedience is confirmed. I knew exactly what the meeting would be. A test. I agreed to it. We met in a conference room at the attorney's office. My parents sat side by side, closer than they had in years. The attorney, a woman with calm eyes and efficient movements, smiled politely, and closed the door. "This is a standard review," she began. "Given recent changes, your parents want to make sure their intentions are clearly documented." Elaine spoke first. "We want peace," Richard nodded. "And fairness." I didn't respond. The attorney slid a draft across the table. It was neat, balanced, almost generous. Andrew would receive the house subject to conditions. I would receive a financial allocation. Not insignificant, not equal. Control still disguised as kindness. Elaine watched my face closely. "This is meant to show we value both of you." I folded my hands. "I don't negotiate love through documents." The attorney blinked. "This isn't negotiation. It's planning. It's leverage," I said calmly. "And I don't accept it anymore." Richard leaned forward. "You're reading too much into this." "No," I replied. "I'm reading it correctly." Elaine's voice tightened. "So what do you want?" There it was. The question that had always come too late. "I want you to make your decisions without expecting access to my life as payment," I said. "And I want that documented." The attorney looked between us. "That's unconventional." "It's necessary," I said. Richard sighed. "We're trying to keep the family together." I met his eyes. "You're trying to preserve a version of the family that no longer exists." Silence settled. Not hostile, just exposed. Elaine spoke quietly. "If we do this your way, there are no guarantees." I nodded. "That's the point." The attorney cleared her throat. "We can add a clause acknowledging autonomy and non-contingent relationships." Elaine frowned. "That sounds cold." "So did being excluded for years," I replied. In the end, they agreed. Not happily, not fully understanding, but they agreed. I left the meeting lighter than I expected. A week later, Andrew tried again. This time through a mutual acquaintance, a casual invitation, a birthday dinner, neutral ground. I declined. Then he tried through my Aunt Lorraine. "She worries you'll regret cutting ties completely," Lorraine said gently. "I didn't cut ties," I replied. "I redefined them." That distinction mattered. The final attempt came from my mother. A handwritten letter, no accusations, no tears, just a simple line near the end. "I don't know how to love you without guiding you." I read it once. Then I wrote back, "You don't have to guide me. You have to see me." I didn't know if she ever would. At the company, the board approved a long-term strategic plan. 5 years, sustainable growth, transparent governance. They asked me to present it to stakeholders. Standing at the podium, I felt something unfamiliar. Not pride, ownership. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about building something that didn't require me to disappear for it to function. After the meeting, Margaret Collins stopped me in the hallway. "You look different," she said. "I feel different," I replied. She smiled. "That's what happens when you stop carrying other people's weight." That night, alone in my apartment, I thought about my grandmother again. About the way she had prepared quietly, without drama, without asking for recognition. Legacy isn't what you leave behind for others to fight over. It's what you refuse to pass down. There was one last decision to make. Not about money, not about family, about whether I was ready to fully close the door on the version of myself that believed endurance was the same as love. And I knew exactly when that moment would come. Thanksgiving. The invitation was already sitting in my inbox, and whatever I chose next would finally answer the question everyone kept asking in different ways. Would I return, or would I choose myself without apology one last time? Thanksgiving has a way of exposing the lies we tell ourselves about family. The invitation came from my mother, sent 3 weeks before the holiday. No subject line, no explanations, just a date, a time, and the familiar address I had spent most of my life trying to earn a place in. I didn't respond right away. I let it sit, not to punish her, to see what surfaced in me when I didn't rush to smooth things over. What surfaced was memory. Thanksgiving dinners where Andrew carved the turkey while my father beamed calling him the man of the house. Conversations that drifted past me as if I were furniture. Compliments given in my direction that always came with instructions. Smile more. Don't be difficult. Be grateful. I forwarded the invitation to Daniel with one line. Any legal reason I should attend? His reply came quickly. None. Only emotional. That was my answer. Still, I considered it carefully. Not because I owed them anything, but because I owed myself honesty. Avoidance can look a lot like strength until it's examined closely. I asked myself one simple question. If nothing changed at that table, would I leave feeling smaller? The answer came without hesitation. Yes. I replied to my mother the next morning. I won't be coming this year. I hope you have a peaceful holiday. No justification. No explanation. No apology. Her response came an hour later. Your absence will be noticed. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then typed back. So was my presence. That was the end of the exchange. Thanksgiving morning arrived, gray and quiet. I woke early, made coffee, and stood by the window, watching the city stretch awake. For the first time, the day felt open instead of heavy. I spent it differently. I volunteered at a local food pantry. That morning, something I'd signed up for weeks earlier, without thinking much about the timing. I worked beside people who didn't know my name, my history, or my family. They thanked me without expectation. We packed boxes. We joked about the weather. We shared stories that didn't require translation. It felt real. In the afternoon, I cooked a small meal for myself. Nothing elaborate, just food I liked prepared at my own pace. I ate at my kitchen table with the window open, the city sounds drifting in. No tension, no performance. That evening my phone buzzed. It was my father. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. His voice sounded tired. The house feels empty today, he said. Your mother's upset. Andrew didn't come either. I listened once, then I deleted it. Not out of anger, out of necessity. The next week brought another shift. The company finalized the long-term governance changes. Independent oversight, clear succession planning, no family exemptions. It was approved unanimously. One board member pulled me aside afterward. You did what your father couldn't, he said. You separated legacy from entitlement. I nodded. It needed to be done. At home, I framed my grandmother's photograph and placed it on a shelf by the window. Not as a shrine, as a reminder. Strength doesn't always look like staying. December crept in quietly. Holiday decorations appeared in store windows. Invitations circulated. People asked what my plans were for Christmas. I'm undecided, I said. And I meant it. Then 2 weeks before Christmas, the final trigger arrived. A certified letter from Andrew. Short, direct, carefully worded. He was contesting the estate plan, claiming undue influence, claiming manipulation, claiming that I had alienated our parents to secure advantage. Daniel called as soon as I forwarded it. He's grasping, he said. But this will force a response. What kind, I asked. Formal, he replied. Clear, irreversible. I closed my eyes. Not from stress, from clarity. Let's do it, I said. Daniel prepared the documents within days. Affidavits, timelines, witness statements, my grandmother's notes, everything laid out with precision. I signed where he indicated, slowly, deliberately. Each signature felt like a door closing, not slammed, closed. Daniel looked at me afterward. Once this is filed, there's no going back to how things were. I met his gaze. There was never anything to go back to. Christmas arrived without snow that year. I spent it quietly. A long walk, a simple dinner, a call with Lorraine, who didn't ask questions I didn't offer answers to. Late that night, my phone buzzed one last time. A message from my mother. You've made your choice. I read it once, then I replied, yes, I have. I turned off my phone and sat in the stillness. The final act wasn't confrontation. It wasn't victory. It was consent. Consent to live without negotiating my worth. There was only one chapter left now. The one where I stopped reacting to the past and began choosing the future on my own terms. And for the first time, the future felt entirely mine. After you stop fighting, there's a strange quiet that settles in. Not relief, not happiness, just space. January arrived with sharp air and clean mornings. The city felt reset, as if everyone had agreed to start smaller, more honestly. I mirrored that instinct. I cleared my calendar. I said no without explanation. I stopped scanning my phone for messages that never came. Andrew's estate challenge moved forward exactly as Daniel predicted. Slowly, ineffectively. The affidavits dismantled his claims, line by line. Dates contradicted his version. Witnesses confirmed my grandmother's independence. Even the language he used worked against him, revealing resentment instead of evidence. The judge requested mediation. Daniel asked if I wanted to attend. No, I said. I've already said everything. Andrew withdrew the challenge a week later. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a quiet retreat. That told me everything I needed to know. My parents didn't reach out again. I didn't reach out either. For the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was neutral, like a door left closed long enough that you stop wondering what's on the other side. At the company, the first quarter, under the new structure, exceeded projections. Nothing dramatic, just steady improvement. Fewer fires, fewer secrets. People did their jobs without guessing what mood leadership would be in. One afternoon, a junior manager stopped me in the hallway. "I've never worked somewhere this clear," she said. "It's calm." I smiled. That's intentional. Clarity had become my guiding principle. Not because it was kind, because it was fair. I began mentoring 2 women in the operations department. Not formally, just regular check-ins, honest conversations, no promises I couldn't keep. One of them asked me once, "How did you know when to stop trying to fix them?" I didn't answer right away. Because I realized they weren't broken, I said. They were benefiting. That truth had taken years to accept. February brought an unexpected invitation. A speaking panel. Women in leadership. Family-owned businesses. They wanted me to talk about transition governance and ethical boundaries. I considered declining. Then I remembered how long I'd believed my story wasn't worth telling. I accepted. Standing on that stage, I didn't mention my brother, or my parents, or the court. I talked about systems, about clarity, about how unspoken expectations become cages. Afterward, a woman in the audience approached me. "My mother says I'm selfish for wanting out," she said quietly. I thought I was the problem. I met her eyes. "You're allowed to choose yourself." She nodded like she'd been holding her breath for years. At home, my life felt smaller in the best way. I cooked, I read, I slept, I took long walks without thinking about the next conversation I'd need to manage. One evening, Lorraine came by for dinner. She looked around my apartment, then at me. "You seem lighter," she said. "I am," I replied. She hesitated. "Your mother still asks about you." I didn't respond. "She doesn't know how to let go," Lorraine added. "I know," I said. "That doesn't make it my responsibility." Lorraine smiled sadly. "Your grandmother would be proud." That mattered more than anything else she could have said. In early March, Daniel called with the final update. "All matters resolved," he said. "No pending claims, no exposure." "Thank you," I replied. "You did the hard part," he said. "Most people don't." After we hung up, I sat for a long time at my kitchen table. I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who believed endurance was loyalty. The one who thought silence was strength. She had done her best with what she knew. I didn't blame her, but I didn't need to live as her anymore. The story everyone thought was about revenge wasn't. It was about permission. Permission to stop explaining. Permission to stop proving. Permission to walk away without asking to be followed. The last thing I did before bed that night was open my notebook and write a single sentence. I choose a life that doesn't require me to disappear. There was one chapter left, Not because the past had anything more to say, but because endings deserve to be named and lessons deserve to be claimed. This one wasn't loud. It was permanent. The last thing people expect after a family war is calm. They imagine either reconciliation or ruin, a tearful reunion, a dramatic downfall, something cinematic enough to justify all the damage. What no one prepares you for is the quiet morning where nothing hurts anymore and no one is asking anything from you. That morning came for me in late spring. I woke up before my alarm, sunlight spilling across the floor of my apartment, the city already alive outside my window. There were no messages waiting, no updates to monitor, no tension in my chest bracing for impact. Just a simple awareness of where I was and who I had become. I made coffee and sat at the table without my phone. That alone felt like victory. The company was steady now. Not perfect, but honest. Systems replaced secrets. Accountability replaced favoritism. I no longer had to prove I belonged in rooms I had earned my way into years ago. My presence wasn't questioned. It was expected. Once during a board meeting, a director referred to the company as your legacy. I corrected him. It's a responsibility, I said, not a throne. That distinction mattered. My parents faded into the background of my life, not as villains, not as ghosts, but as people I no longer oriented myself around. Sometimes I wondered if my mother still waited for me to soften, to come back, to apologize for refusing to be managed. If she did, she kept it to herself. Andrew disappeared entirely. I heard through Lorraine that he had taken a job in another state, something far from leadership, far from leverage. I didn't ask where. I didn't need the details. His journey was no longer adjacent to mine. The absence of updates felt like closure. On my 33rd birthday, I did something I had never done before. I invited people into my home without worrying how it would look to anyone else. Margaret came bringing a bottle of wine in her dry humor. Lorraine brought a cake she'd baked herself, uneven frosting and all. 2 colleagues from work stopped by people who knew me, as I was now, not as I had been trained to be. We ate. We laughed. We stayed late without tension. No one toasted me for what I had endured. They celebrated who I was becoming. Later that night, after everyone left, I stood by the window again, looking out over the city that had witnessed every phase of my transformation. I thought about revenge and how often it's misunderstood. Revenge isn't always about punishment. Sometimes it's about refusal. Refusing to accept narratives that shrink you. Refusing to inherit dysfunction as destiny. Refusing to spend the rest of your life proving you deserved what should have been given freely. I didn't destroy my family. I stopped letting them destroy me. That distinction is everything. If you're listening to this and wondering when it's your turn to speak up, to draw a line, to choose yourself, here's the truth no one tells you plainly. You don't need permission. You don't need to be believed by everyone. You don't need to win the argument. You need to decide that your peace is not negotiable. Once you do, the rest follows. Quietly, irreversibly. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been excluded, controlled, or made small by the people who should have protected you, know this. You're not wrong for wanting more. You're not cruel for walking away. And you're not alone. If you found something of yourself in this story, leave a comment and share your thoughts. And if you want to hear more stories about reclaiming dignity, setting boundaries, and choosing yourself when no one else will subscribe and stay with us. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is living well. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop waiting for someone else to finally see you.